I still remember the exact moment I stepped out of that taxi. The sun was too bright for how I felt inside. My hands were shaking as I held the envelope, the wedding invitation of my younger brother, Daniel. The same boy I once carried on my back when he was too tired to walk home from school. The same boy who used to cry into my shoulders when nightmares made him believe our mother would never come back. Now he was getting married. And I was supposed to be proud. But I had no idea that pride and humiliation could live in the same moment. For 23 years, I was not just Daniel's sister. I was his mother, his father, his protector, and his sacrifice. After our mother died from illness, everything collapsed overnight. And when our father disappeared into gambling debts and alcohol, it was like the world forgot we existed. I was 21. Daniel was 8. Most people at 21 are still learning life. I was learning how to survive it for 2 people. I dropped out of nursing school without even finishing my first clinical rotation. I still remember the letter I never got to submit. The dreams I folded and placed in a drawer I never opened again. Instead, I worked double shifts at a diner during the day. At night, I cleaned office buildings until my hands smelled like chemicals and exhaustion became my permanent condition. And when I came home, Daniel was waiting. Homework undone. Hunger in his eyes. Fear he tried to hide. So I smiled. Every single time. Even when I had nothing left to give. Birthdays became miracles I performed with borrowed money and imagination. Christmases became stories instead of gifts. But Daniel never felt poor. Because I made sure of it. I told myself, if I can just get him through this, everything will be worth it. And it was. Because Daniel became successful. A lawyer. A respected name. The kind of man who wore tailored suits and spoke with confidence that made people listen. When he bought his first house, I cried in silence for hours. Not because I was jealous. But because I felt like I finally succeeded at something in life. Even when he started calling less. Even when visits became rare. Even when he began speaking in a tone that felt distant. I told myself. He's busy. He's becoming someone important. And I believed it. Until the invitation came. A thick cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. Daniel Carter and Vanessa Miller, wedding ceremony. I remember sitting on my tiny apartment floor holding it like it was something sacred. I cried that day. Not out of sadness. But pride. Because I thought, my boy made it. I spent 3 months preparing for that day. Saving every coin. Skipping meals. Choosing a navy blue dress I could barely afford but felt dignified in. And I even brought something special. An old photo album. Inside it were pictures of Daniel as a child, missing teeth, messy hair, school uniforms slightly too big, and me always standing behind him like a shadow that refused to leave. I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to remind him where he came from. I wanted to see him smile like he used to. But nothing prepared me for what waited at that wedding venue. Nothing. The place looked like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers. White marble floors. Guests dressed like royalty. And then I stepped in. And the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the good kind. The kind that follows something wrong. A wedding coordinator looked at me with confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, scanning me from head to toe like I didn't belong in her world. "I'm Daniel's sister," I said softly. Her expression changed. Not warmth. Not recognition. But hesitation. His sister? Before I could respond, I felt it. Eyes. Everywhere. Whispers I couldn't hear clearly but could feel like needles on my skin. Then a bridesmaid walked past me, paused, turned back slowly, and frowned. "You actually came," she said under her breath. I laughed nervously. "Of course I came. It's my brother's wedding." But she didn't laugh back. She just walked away. Something in my chest tightened. And then I heard it. A voice. Vanessa. My brother's fiancée. She was speaking to a group of guests nearby, her tone light, almost amused. "She's not really his sister in the way people think," Vanessa said, smiling as if sharing gossip. "Daniel told me she basically clung to him because she had nothing else going for her." I froze. The album slipped slightly in my hands. Clung? Nothing else going for me? My breath became uneven. My entire life, reduced to a joke I wasn't part of. And before I could even process it, I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly. Daniel. My brother. My boy. Except he wasn't looking at me like family. He looked embarrassed. Like I was something he wished wasn't there. His voice was low. Careful. Cold. You shouldn't have come. My heart stopped. For a moment, I actually thought I misheard him. What? I whispered. Daniel didn't repeat it loudly. He leaned in closer, his eyes darting around like even being seen talking to me was dangerous. You shouldn't have come, he said again, lower this time. Vanessa's family is important. They don't understand, people like you. People like you? Those words didn't land immediately. They hovered in the air first, like my brain refused to accept them. Then they sank in. Slowly. Painfully. And everything inside me shifted. I stared at him, waiting for a laugh. Waiting for the correction. Waiting for the moment he would say, I didn't mean it like that. But it didn't come. Instead, he looked away. Like I was the one making this uncomfortable. Like I was the mistake. I felt my fingers tighten around the photo album I brought. The album filled with every version of him that still loved me without conditions. Daniel, I said softly, my voice already breaking, I raised you. He flinched slightly, but not from guilt. From embarrassment. I know, he said quickly. That's exactly why this is complicated. Complicated. Not heartbreaking. Not wrong. Just complicated. He exhaled sharply, as if I was delaying something important. Vanessa's family thinks I came from a stable background, he continued. They think I had normal upbringing. If they see you here, asking questions, bringing memories. He glanced at my hands holding the album. Then back at my face. It will ruin everything I've built. Everything I've built. I felt my throat tighten. Not because I didn't understand the pressure. But because I was hearing what he was really saying. You are what I built my life away from. I took a small step closer. Daniel. I skipped meals so you could eat. His jaw tightened. I worked 2 jobs so you could stay in school. He looked away again. I dropped my dreams so you could have one. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then he finally spoke. I didn't ask you to do all that. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Not because it was loud. But because it erased everything quietly. Like my entire life had been a misunderstanding. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Before I could respond, Vanessa appeared beside him. She looked me over properly this time. Slowly. Like assessing something inconvenient. So this is her, she said calmly. Daniel didn't correct her. Didn't defend me. Didn't even look at me. That was the answer. Vanessa smiled faintly. You understand, right? She said. This is a very important day for our families. Our families. Not mine. Not Daniel's past. Just the acceptable present. Then she added something softer, almost polite. It would be better if you left quietly. I looked at Daniel again. Just once. Waiting. Begging without words. But he still didn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, I understood something I wasn't ready to accept. I didn't lose my brother today. I had already lost him long ago, and just didn't know it yet. My voice came out barely above a whisper. After everything. Daniel finally looked at me. But what I saw in his eyes wasn't love. It was fear. Of losing status. Of losing image. Of losing everything except me. And then he said it again. Please, just don't make this harder than it already is. I stood there. Holding 23 years of sacrifice in my hands like it meant nothing in this room. Then slowly. I nodded. Not because I agreed. But because something inside me stopped asking for permission to be loved. I turned slightly. Not to leave yet. But just enough for them to believe I would. And as I stepped back into the crowd watching silently, I made a decision I didn't speak out loud. If I was going to disappear from their version of this story, Then I would make sure they never controlled the ending. I didn't leave. Not immediately. My feet moved, but not toward the exit. Not because I was brave in that moment, but because my body was still trying to process what my mind refused to accept. Just don't make this harder than it already is. That sentence kept replaying in my head. Harder for who? For me, or for him? I stood near the edge of the hall, pretending to look at decorations I didn't care about anymore, while trying to breathe through the weight pressing on my chest. That's when I heard it again. Laughter. Soft. Controlled. Performative. Vanessa's voice carried just enough for me to hear. "She's still here?" someone asked. "Yes," Vanessa replied, almost amused. "I think she's struggling to understand boundaries." A few guests chuckled lightly. Not loud enough to be obvious. Just enough to hurt. I turned slightly and saw her surrounded by people in expensive suits and dresses, people who looked like they belonged in this world without question. And then I saw Daniel. Standing beside her. Not correcting anything. Not defending anything. Just smiling faintly at something someone else said, as if my existence was a minor inconvenience happening in the background of his perfect day. Something in my stomach twisted. I told myself to stay calm. To think. To understand. But every second I stayed there, something inside me shifted further away from the person I used to be. A waiter passed by, and I accidentally brushed against him. My photo album slipped slightly from my grip. One photo fell out. It landed face up. A younger Daniel. Me behind him. Holding his school uniform bag while he laughed mid-picture. A guest nearby noticed. Then another. "Is that him?" someone whispered. "Why is she in all of these pictures?" The air changed. Not loud. But sharp. Like the room suddenly remembered I existed. A woman picked up one of the photos. Studied it. Then looked at me. Confused. Then uncomfortable. "Wait," she really raised him? The whisper spread faster than I could stop it. I bent down quickly, gathering the photos, my hands trembling slightly now. Not from sadness. From exposure. Because something I never considered was happening. My private life was becoming public without my permission. And Daniel saw it. For the first time since I arrived, he looked alarmed. Not for me. For himself. He walked over quickly and grabbed my arm. "Why did you bring that here?" he hissed. I looked at him. Really looked at him. "I didn't think I needed permission to remember my own life," I said quietly. His grip tightened. "This is not the place." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Then where is the place, Daniel? Because apparently I don't belong anywhere you are anymore." He froze for half a second. Just half. But it was enough for me to see it. The truth he didn't want to say out loud. That I wasn't just unwanted here. I was dangerous to his image. Vanessa appeared beside him again, her heels clicking softly on the floor like punctuation marks to my humiliation. "This is getting uncomfortable," she said calmly. Then she looked at Daniel. "You need to handle this. Not we. Not us. Just him." Daniel exhaled sharply and lowered his voice. "You need to leave," he said. "Right now." Something inside me almost laughed at the simplicity of it. Leave. Like I was a guest who overstayed. Like I wasn't the foundation he built his entire life on. I stared at him. And for the first time, I didn't feel confusion. I felt clarity. "You're not asking me," I said quietly. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Around us, the wedding continued in fragments, music still playing softly, guests still pretending not to watch. But I could feel it now. The shift. The curiosity. The judgment. The story forming without me controlling it. Vanessa leaned closer to Daniel. "I told you this could happen," she whispered. "This is exactly why we needed everything clean." Clean. As if my life was dirt that needed removal. Daniel finally looked at me again. But this time, something was different. Not softer. Not kinder. More desperate. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "please don't do anything that will embarrass me today." That word again. Embarrass. Not hurt. Not betray. Just embarrassment. I nodded slowly. Then I said something I didn't plan. Something that came from somewhere deeper than anger. I didn't come here to embarrass you. I paused. I came here because I thought I still had a brother. Silence hit harder this time. Even the background noise felt distant. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked away. And in that moment, I saw it. Not just rejection, but detachment. Like he had already emotionally left me long before today. Vanessa gently touched his arm. We should focus on the ceremony, she said softly. As if I was already a concluded problem. Daniel nodded. Then he looked at me one last time. I'm sorry, he said. But it didn't feel like apology. It felt like dismissal. And then he walked away. Just like that. Back to his wedding. Back to his life. Back to pretending I wasn't standing there holding everything that built him. And I realized something chilling. They weren't afraid of what I might say. They were afraid of what I already knew. And that meant. I stood there long after Daniel walked away. Not because I didn't know what to do. But because my mind was still trying to catch up with what had just happened. A stranger could have watched that moment and thought I was just an unwanted guest at a wedding. But I knew the truth. I wasn't unwanted. I was being erased in real time. The music resumed softly again, like nothing had happened. Guests returned to their conversations. Laughter restarted. Glasses clinked. But I couldn't unsee what I had just seen. The way Daniel looked at me like I was a risk. The way Vanessa spoke about me like I was a mistake in their story. And worst of all, the way nobody questioned it. I slowly bent down and gathered the remaining photos from the floor. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That surprised me. Because inside, something had stopped reacting emotionally. Not healed. Not calm. Just numb in a way that felt dangerously focused. I placed the album back into my bag carefully. Like I was storing evidence. Because that's what it was becoming now. Evidence. A woman passed by me and whispered to her friend without even trying to hide it. I feel like she's obsessed with him. The friend nodded. It's sad. Imagine clinging to your brother like that. I froze slightly. Not because of the words. But because of how easily people accepted them. No questions. No curiosity. Just agreement. Because it was easier to believe I was unstable than to believe Daniel was ungrateful. That was when I understood something deeper about this room. Perception was more powerful than truth here. And Daniel had already chosen perception. From across the hall, I saw him speaking with Vanessa's parents. They looked at him with approval. Respect. Admiration. He was performing his life perfectly. And I was the flaw in the background. Then something unexpected happened. A man approached me. Middle-aged. Well-dressed. Probably a guest. He looked at me carefully before speaking. You're Daniel's sister, he asked quietly. I hesitated. Yes. He studied my face for a moment longer than comfortable. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. I've known Daniel for a few years. He never mentioned you. That sentence wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even cruel. It was worse. It was revealing. Because silence isn't accidental. It's intentional. Before I could respond, he added. He said he grew up alone. Worked hard for everything. My lips parted slightly. But no words came out. Because now I understood the rewrite wasn't just happening here. It had already happened everywhere. My entire existence had been edited out of his narrative long before today. I turned slightly and saw Vanessa watching from a distance. She wasn't smiling now. She was assessing. Measuring damage. Then she walked over. Slowly. Calmly. Like someone approaching a problem they already planned to solve. You're making things uncomfortable, she said softly. I looked at her. For the first time, really looked at her. Not as a bride. Not as a rival. But as someone who understood exactly what she was doing. You rewrote his story, I said quietly. Her expression didn't change. I protected it, she corrected. I let out a slow breath. That's what you call it? She stepped slightly closer. I call it reality management. There it was. The truth, wrapped in elegance. She glanced toward Daniel again. He has worked too hard to be pulled back into a past that doesn't benefit him anymore. A past that doesn't benefit him. That sentence landed differently. Because it reduced my entire life into something inconvenient. I felt something rise in my chest again. Not emotion. Decision. You think I'm here to take him back? I asked. She tilted her head slightly. Aren't you? I smiled faintly. For the first time since I arrived. No, I said quietly. I think you misunderstood something. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I stepped closer just enough for her to listen properly. I didn't come here to compete with you. A pause. I came here because I finally realized I was never part of his success story. That confused her for a moment. Good. Because confusion breaks control. Before she could respond, Daniel reappeared behind her. He looked tense now. Controlled panic hidden behind politeness. Evelyn, he said quickly, can we talk somewhere private? I looked at him. And something inside me shifted again. Because now I saw it clearly. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He was trying to contain it. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. But I didn't move. And neither did he. Because we both knew something had changed. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a confrontation that had already started. And neither of us could stop what was coming next. Daniel led me away from the main hall. Not to talk. Not really. But to control where the conversation could happen. We stopped near a quieter corridor lined with white curtains and soft lighting that felt almost sacred, like even arguments here were expected to remain polite. He turned to me immediately. His voice dropped. Urgent. Low. Evelyn, I need you to understand something, he said. I stayed quiet. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was observing. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing back toward the hall like he expected someone to follow. You showing up like this wasn't planned, he said. Vanessa's family is very sensitive about perception. If they think there are complications in my background. I interrupted softly. Complications? He paused. Just a fraction. But enough. Yes, he said carefully. Complications. I nodded slowly. Like I was accepting a technical term. Then I asked quietly. Is that what I am now? Silence. That silence said everything. He exhaled sharply. It's not like that, he said quickly, already defensive. You just don't understand the stakes here. The stakes, I repeated. He nodded. My career. My marriage. My reputation. Everything I've worked for. Something inside me tilted. Not broken this time. Just clarified. And where do I fit in that list? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. That delay was the answer. When he finally spoke, his tone softened, but not into love. Into management. You don't fit into it, Evelyn, he said. That's the problem. A quiet beat. Then he added. But I'm trying to fix this. Fix. Like I was damaged. Like I was an error in an otherwise clean system. I looked at him for a long moment. And I realized something painful. He wasn't lying to hurt me. He genuinely believed this version of reality. That I was the disruption. Not the foundation. From the hall, faint laughter echoed again. Life continuing without me. Daniel lowered his voice even further. Please just leave quietly after the ceremony, he said. I'll send you something later. Money. Whatever you need. Just don't. I cut him off again. You think this is about money? He hesitated. Then said carefully. It always ends up being about money. That sentence landed differently. Because it revealed how far he had already moved away from me. Not just emotionally. But morally. I took a slow breath. And for the first time, I didn't feel like pleading. I felt like stepping outside of him entirely. I didn't come here for money, I said softly. I came here because I wanted to see my brother get married. A pause. Then I added, the boy I raised. Something flickered in his eyes at that. Annoyance. Not guilt. Not shame. Annoyance that I kept pulling him backward. He straightened slightly. His tone changed. More controlled now. More final. Evelyn, he said, I think you need to accept that your role in my life has changed. That word again. Role. Like I was assigned to him. Like I could be reassigned. I stared at him. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't just rejection. It was restructuring. He wasn't pushing me away emotionally. He was rewriting my place in reality. And then he said something that froze everything inside me. I can't let you ruin this for me. Ruin. I almost laughed. But I didn't. Because behind him, I noticed something. Vanessa. Standing at the edge of the corridor. Watching. Listening. Not surprised. Not emotional. Calculating. She had always been part of this conversation. Even when she wasn't speaking. Daniel followed my gaze and stiffened slightly. Don't involve her, he said quickly. But it was too late. Because I finally understood the triangle clearly. Daniel wasn't choosing between two women. He had already chosen. And I was the cost of that choice. Vanessa stepped forward slowly. Her voice calm. Is everything okay? She asked. Daniel answered immediately. Yes. We're just resolving something. Resolving. Emotional disruptions. That's what I had become. Not a person. Not a sister. A disruption. Something unwanted in a carefully built system. I looked between them. And something inside me stopped resisting. Not surrendering. Just shifting. Because I realized something important. They weren't reacting to me. They were reacting to what I represented. The truth. The past. The debt. And truth, when ignored long enough, eventually becomes dangerous. I slowly reached into my bag. Daniel noticed immediately. His voice sharpened. What are you doing? I didn't answer. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. Evelyn, she said carefully, don't create a scene. I pulled out the photo album again. And placed it gently in my hands. Not for drama. Not for attention. But for clarity. I'm not creating anything, I said softly. I think I'm ending something you both started a long time ago. Daniel stepped forward quickly. Evelyn, stop. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking at the space between who he was. And who he had become. And I finally understood. I opened the photo album slowly. Not because I needed to see it again. But because I needed them to see it. The silence in the corridor thickened immediately. Even the distant sound of music from the hall felt like it was happening in another world. Daniel's eyes dropped to the pages. Vanessa stayed still, but I noticed her jaw tighten slightly. That small detail told me everything. They didn't fear me. They feared what I had. I turned the first page. A younger Daniel. Barefoot in a cramped apartment hallway, laughing with a school bag almost bigger than him. My hand in the frame, holding his shoulder. I remember this day, I said quietly. Daniel didn't respond. I turned another page. Him asleep on my lap after a fever night. Me holding a bowl of water, exhausted, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. I didn't sleep for 2 nights that week, I continued softly. You had malaria. I thought I was going to lose you. A flicker crossed his face. Not guilt. Something more uncomfortable. Recognition. Vanessa glanced at him briefly. Then back at me. Why are you showing us this? She asked flatly. I closed the album slightly. Not fully. Just enough to pause. Because I want to understand something, I said. I looked at Daniel. When did I become something you needed to erase? He exhaled sharply. This isn't about erasing you, he said. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. I nodded slowly. That's interesting, I said. Because I had stopped raising my voice. Stopped shaking. Something inside me had shifted into observation mode. The pain was still there. But it wasn't leading anymore. I was. I opened the album again. Flipped to another page. Receipts. School fees. Medical bills. Rent arrears notices I quietly handled so he would never know how close we were to collapse. I kept all of it, I said. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? He asked. That question hit differently. Not because it was harsh, but because it revealed distance. As if keeping proof of survival was suspicious. I looked at him for a long moment. Because I knew one day, I said softly, someone would try to rewrite it. Vanessa stepped in slightly. This is emotional manipulation, she said calmly. I almost smiled. Not at her. At the predictability. No, I replied. This is documentation. A pause. Then I added. You're both confusing comfort with truth. That line landed heavier than I expected. Daniel looked away briefly. For the first time, he didn't have a quick response. That silence gave me space. Space to think. Space to remember. And something I hadn't expected began rising inside me. Clarity about something I had ignored for years. I slowly reached into the back of the album. A hidden pocket. Daniel noticed immediately. What is that? He asked sharply. I didn't answer. I pulled it out. A small folder. Worn. Folded too many times. Vanessa's expression changed slightly. Daniel's posture stiffened. Evelyn, he warned. But I already opened it. Inside. Loan agreements. Signed documents. Bank transfers. Proof. Real proof. Not memories. Not emotions. Facts. Daniel's face went still. No, he whispered. I looked at him. Quietly. You told me you'd repay me when you started working, I said. His throat moved slightly. I did, he said quickly. Things changed. Things didn't change, I interrupted softly. You did. Silence. The corridor felt smaller now. He reached for the folder instinctively. I didn't move it away. I just held it steady. I paid your tuition when you were going to drop out, I said. I signed that loan because you promised you'd handle it. His voice rose slightly. I didn't say I wouldn't pay you back. But you didn't, I said simply. That stopped him. Not my tone. The simplicity. Vanessa stepped back slightly now. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her expression. Because this wasn't emotion anymore. It was liability. Daniel's voice lowered again. This is not the time. No, I said softly. This is exactly the time. I looked at both of them. And something inside me shifted fully now. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder. Stronger. Understanding. You didn't just forget me, I said quietly. You built your life on top of what I carried. Daniel's eyes flickered. That's not fair, he said. A small laugh escaped me. Not humor. Disbelief. Fair? I repeated. I closed the folder gently. I stopped asking for fair a long time ago. Silence again. This one heavier. Because no one knew where the conversation went from here. And for the first time, neither Daniel nor Vanessa looked in control. The silence stretched longer than it should have. Daniel looked at the folder in my hands like it had weight beyond paper. Like it was something alive. Something dangerous. Vanessa broke it first. Her voice was calmer than her expression. This is a private matter, she said. It doesn't belong here. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said. Both of them looked slightly relieved. Then I added. It should have been handled a long time ago. That relief disappeared instantly. Daniel exhaled sharply. Evelyn, I never said I wouldn't repay you, he insisted again, voice tighter now. I just needed time. Things got complicated. Complicated, I repeated softly. I looked at him. Really looked. You keep using that word like it explains what happened. A pause. Then I asked. Do you remember the night you got your law school admission letter? His expression shifted slightly. Vanessa glanced at him. He didn't answer immediately. So I continued. You cried, I said quietly. You said you finally had a chance to change our lives. His jaw tightened. I remember, he said. I nodded. And I told you I believed in you. Silence. I stepped slightly closer. And when the scholarship didn't cover everything, I continued, I signed a loan in my name so you wouldn't lose that chance. Daniel's eyes flickered. I didn't force you to do that, he said. That sentence again. Not asked. Not acknowledged. Just detached. Like sacrifice was a voluntary hobby I chose for fun. I inhaled slowly. No, I said softly. You didn't force me. A pause. I did it because you were my brother. Silence tightened again. Vanessa shifted slightly, uncomfortable now. Because this wasn't emotional anymore. It was structural. A system being exposed. Daniel rubbed his forehead. This is exactly why I didn't want this here, he said under his breath. I felt something inside me shift again. Not anger. Clarity. You didn't want me here, I corrected gently. He looked up quickly. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant, I replied. Silence. Longer this time. From the hall, faint applause erupted, someone announcing something festive. Life continuing. Oblivious. I closed the folder slightly. Not hiding it. Just holding it like it mattered less than it used to. I think I finally understand something, I said quietly. Both of them looked at me now. Careful. Watching. I continued. You don't see me as someone who helped you become who you are. A pause. You see me as something you had to outgrow. Daniel's expression tightened. That's not true, he said immediately. But it came too fast. Too defensive. Vanessa looked at him now. Not comforting. Assessing. I watched that shift carefully. Then I said something I hadn't planned. You didn't just forget me, I said softly. You rebranded your past. That hit differently. Even Vanessa didn't respond immediately. Daniel's voice lowered. I never denied you existed. I nodded. I know. Then I tilted my head slightly. You just removed the parts of me that made your success uncomfortable. Silence. That one landed deeper. Because it wasn't emotional anymore. It was accurate. Vanessa exhaled slowly. This is becoming a scene, she said. I looked at her. Calmly. It already became a scene the moment I stopped fitting your version of reality. That shut her down for a moment. Daniel stepped forward again. His voice lower now. Evelyn, what do you want from this? That question. Finally. Not denial. Not correction. But inquiry. I held his gaze. And for the first time, I answered honestly. I don't want anything from you, I said quietly. A pause. Then I added. I just don't want you to lie about what happened anymore. Silence again. Different this time. Because there was nothing left to argue against. Only truth. Daniel looked away first. That told me more than anything else in this conversation. Vanessa spoke softly now. We can resolve this privately, she said. This doesn't need to go further. I looked at her. And something inside me finally settled. Because I understood her role now. She wasn't the villain. She was the gatekeeper. The one maintaining the version of reality they both needed to survive in. But reality doesn't survive containment forever. I slowly closed the folder fully this time. And placed it back in my bag. Both of them watched carefully. Daniel's voice softened slightly. Evelyn. But I raised my hand gently. Not angrily. Just ending the space. I'm not here to fight you anymore, I said. A pause. I think I've already won something you don't understand yet. Neither of them spoke. Because neither of them knew what I meant. But I did. And that was enough. I turned slightly toward the corridor exit. Not leaving yet. Just showing direction. And I said one last thing before stepping away. You built your future on my silence. A pause. Then quietly. I'm done being quiet. And I walked away. Not to escape, but to prepare. Because now, it wasn't about what they had done anymore. It was about what I was about to do with it. I didn't go far. Just far enough that I could no longer hear their voices. Far enough that I could breathe without feeling watched. The corridor opened into a quieter side lounge, dim lights, soft chairs, a space designed for guests to rest, without ever truly disconnecting from the celebration. I sat down. Not because I was tired, but because I needed stillness to think clearly. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to Daniel. I was studying him. Studying everything. Every memory I had ignored. Every moment I had justified. Every time I said, he's just busy, he's just stressed, he's just changed. But the truth was no longer hiding. It had been there the whole time. I opened my bag again. Not out of emotion. Out of instinct. The folder was still there. But now I wasn't looking at it like proof of pain. I was looking at it like leverage. That thought surprised me. I paused. Because I didn't recognize that version of myself immediately. But it was there. Quiet. Clear. I pulled out my phone. Scrolled through old messages. Years of them. Daniel, I'll never forget what you've done for me. Daniel, you're the reason I survived. Daniel, one day I'll make it all worth it. I stopped on that one. One day I'll make it all worth it. My thumb hovered. Then I whispered to myself. When did that day expire? A voice in my head answered instantly. The moment it became inconvenient. I leaned back slightly. And that's when something strange happened. Not emotional breakdown. Not sadness. Clarity sharpened into strategy. Because I realized something important. Daniel didn't just distance himself from me. He built a new identity that required my absence. Which meant I wasn't a memory to him anymore. I was a risk. And risks get managed. My phone vibrated. Unknown number again. I answered. This time, no hesitation. Vanessa. Her voice was different now. Less controlled. More tense. We need to talk, she said. I didn't respond immediately. She continued. Daniel is not handling this well. A faint pause. And I think you know what I mean. I looked down at my hands. Calm now. Steady. I didn't do anything to him, I said quietly. There was silence on the line. Then she said. You showed up. That again. As if presence was aggression. I stood slowly. Walked toward the window. Outside, the venue looked perfect. Beautiful. Fake in a way only expensive things can be. I didn't show up to destroy anything, I said. A pause. I showed up because I thought I still had a family. Vanessa exhaled sharply. This is bigger than emotions, she said. Daniel's reputation, his career. I interrupted gently. You mean the version of him that doesn't include me? Silence. Longer this time. Then she spoke more carefully. What do you want? There it was again. That question. I closed my eyes briefly. Not to think. But to confirm something I already knew. I answered slowly. I don't want anything from you. A pause. Then I added. But I think you should ask Daniel something. Her voice tightened. What? I looked back at the folder in my bag. And said the words calmly. Ask him what happens when the person who built your foundation decides to show the cracks. Silence. Then the call ended. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel angry. I felt aligned. Like everything was finally moving toward its correct shape. I sat back down. Opened the folder one last time. But this time, I wasn't reviewing it. I was preparing it. Sorting. Ordering. Structuring. Because something was becoming very clear now. This wasn't going to stay private. It couldn't. Not anymore. Too many people had already seen too much. Too many assumptions had already been made. Too many lies had already been spoken too confidently. And Daniel. Daniel had made one critical mistake. He underestimated what silence looks like when it finally decides to speak. My phone buzzed again. This time. Daniel. I didn't answer immediately. I watched the screen. Let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. His voice came through immediately. Lower than before. Less controlled. Evelyn, where are you? A pause. I think we need to fix this before it gets worse. Fix. Again. Always fixing me. Fixing the problem he created a version of me to represent. I stood slowly. Looked at the reflection in the window. For the first time in years. I didn't see a sacrifice. I saw a decision. And I said quietly. It already got worse. A pause. Then I added. You just haven't seen how yet. And I ended the call. Not in anger. But in completion. Because something irreversible had just begun. And this time. I wasn't the one being erased. I was the one rewriting the ending. The wedding venue looked the same from the outside. Perfect. Controlled. Expensive. But I wasn't the same person who had walked in hours earlier. I stood across the courtyard for a moment, watching guests still laughing, still celebrating, still pretending nothing had cracked beneath their feet. They had no idea the story had already changed. Not emotionally. Legally. Structurally. I opened my bag and checked everything one last time. The folder. Receipts. Loan agreements. Bank transfers. Messages. The recording. Every piece aligned like a puzzle I had spent 23 years living inside without realizing it was incomplete. Now it wasn't. Now it was whole. My phone vibrated again. Daniel. I didn't answer. I watched it stop. Then start again. Then stop. Then silence. That silence told me everything. He was no longer confident. He was reacting. I walked back inside. Not through the main entrance. Not dramatically. Just calmly. Like I still belonged there. And in a way, I did. Because every inch of that celebration was built on something I had carried. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Not broken. But tense. Like people could feel something was off, even if they didn't know what. Vanessa saw me first. Her posture straightened immediately. She walked toward me quickly. You need to stop this, she said under her breath. I looked at her calmly. I'm not doing anything, I replied. Her eyes narrowed. Daniel is panicking. I nodded slowly. I know. That seemed to frustrate her more. Do you understand what you're risking? She asked. I tilted my head slightly. For who? A pause. For him, she said. I smiled faintly. No, I said softly. For the version of him you built. That landed. Not loudly. But precisely. Before she could respond, Daniel appeared behind her. His face was different now. The confidence was gone. Replaced by something unstable. Urgency. Fear. Evelyn, he said quickly, can we talk alone? I looked at him. Not angry. Not emotional. Just aware. Why? I asked gently. He hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. Because there was nothing left to say privately that wouldn't survive publicly. Vanessa stepped in immediately. This is not the time, she said sharply. But Daniel raised a hand slightly. No, he said quietly. Then he looked at me. Please. That word again. But now it sounded different. Not controlling. Not dismissive. Desperate. I followed him. Not because he led. But because I was ready. We returned to the same corridor. The same place where everything had started to unravel. But this time, I wasn't carrying confusion. I was carrying certainty. Daniel turned to me immediately. His voice low. We need to fix this before it gets worse. I almost smiled. That word again. Fix. Always fixing. Never understanding. Fix what exactly? I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. The misunderstanding. The documents. The way people are starting to look at me. I interrupted softly. So not the truth. Silence. That silence again. He exhaled sharply. You're angry, he said. I nodded slowly. Yes. A pause. But not confused. That confused him slightly. I stepped closer just enough to speak clearly. You told me I shouldn't have come, I said softly. I listened. Then I added. And I realized something. He stayed still. I continued. You didn't want me here because I would ruin your wedding. A pause. You didn't want me here because I would remind people that your success was never built alone. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. I nodded. You're right. Then I looked directly at him. It's not fair. A beat. But it's true. Silence. From the hall, faint music shifted into applause again. Another announcement. Another moment of celebration. While everything underneath it was collapsing. Daniel's voice dropped. What do you want? He asked again. That question. Finally. Not defensive. Not controlling. Just exposed. I took a slow breath. And said. I want you to tell the truth. His expression tightened instantly. That is the truth, he said quickly. I shook my head gently. No, I said. That's your version of survival. A pause. Then I reached into my bag. Daniel noticed immediately. His body tensed. What are you doing? He asked. I didn't answer. I pulled out the folder. Thicker now. Organized. Final. And I said quietly. I'm about to show people what survival actually cost. His face changed immediately. No, Evelyn, don't. But it was already too late. Because I wasn't speaking to him anymore. I was walking. Back into the hall. Back into the crowd. Back into the version of reality they had built. And I wasn't coming to argue. I was coming to correct it. The moment I stepped back into the hall, the atmosphere didn't change immediately. That was the strange part about truth. It doesn't explode at first. It waits. Like it needs permission to be believed. Guests were still talking. Still laughing. Still holding glasses of champagne like nothing in the world could interrupt their comfort. But I noticed the small things now. The glances. The quiet pauses when people noticed me walking back in. Daniel was right behind me. So was Vanessa. But neither of them spoke. Because at that point, words didn't matter anymore. Only outcomes did. I stopped near the center of the hall. Right where everything could be seen. Right where nothing could be hidden. The music softened slightly as if even the sound system sensed tension it couldn't explain. A few guests turned. Then more. Then silence began to spread in waves. Not complete silence. But the kind where conversations die mid-sentence. Because people feel something is about to happen. Vanessa stepped forward slightly. This is unnecessary, she said under her breath. I didn't look at her. I looked at Daniel. For the first time, he didn't look like a man in control of anything. He looked like someone trying to hold a structure together with his bare hands. Evelyn, he said quietly, please don't do this here. That word again. Please. But now it wasn't power. It was fear. I opened the folder slowly. Not dramatically. Just deliberately. Paper by paper. Neatly arranged. Like truth deserved respect even if it was painful. The first document I placed on the table nearby was the loan agreement. A few guests leaned slightly forward. Curious now. Then confused. Then attentive. What is that? Someone whispered. I spoke calmly. This is a student loan I took under my name, I said. A pause. For someone else to complete law school. The word law school shifted attention immediately. People understood that level of investment. Daniel's breathing changed slightly behind me. I continued. He promised to repay it. I placed the bank statements next. And he didn't. A murmur moved through the room. Not loud, but alive. Vanessa stepped closer. "This is private." I interrupted softly. "No," I said. "This is what was hidden." Then I opened my phone and played the recording. Daniel's voice filled the hall. Younger, confident, grateful. "I'll never forget what you've done for me, Ev." A pause in his recorded voice. Then mine. "I just don't want to be forgotten when you succeed." The recording ended. Silence dropped instantly. Not awkward silence. Heavy silence. The kind that changes how people breathe. I looked around the room. Slowly. People weren't looking at me like an intruder anymore. They were looking at Daniel. Vanessa stepped forward quickly. "This can be manipulated," she said sharply. But no one responded immediately. Because the problem wasn't the evidence. It was the consistency of it. Daniel finally spoke. His voice cracked slightly. "This is not how it happened." But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. I turned to him slowly. "This is exactly how it happened," I said calmly. A pause. Then I added, "You just stopped calling it that." A ripple moved through the crowd. Whispers now. Clearer. He was raised by her. She paid for everything. He denied her. Daniel looked around now. Not at me. At them. At the audience he had spent years building an image for. Vanessa stepped closer to him now, quieter. "Say something," she whispered. But he couldn't. Because anything he said now would collide with what they had already seen. And silence was already speaking louder. I closed the folder gently. Not aggressively. Not emotionally. Just final. Then I said something that changed the room completely. "I'm not here to destroy your wedding." A pause. I looked at Daniel. "I'm here to return the truth you left behind." A woman in the audience spoke softly. "That's actually heartbreaking." Another voice followed. "She raised him alone." The narrative was shifting now. Not because I forced it, but because it had been waiting too long to be acknowledged. Daniel stepped forward slightly. His voice low. "This doesn't define me." I nodded. "You're right." A pause. "It defines me." Silence again. Because that distinction mattered. Vanessa looked at Daniel now. Really looked at him. Not as a partner, but as a risk. And I saw it happen. That moment. When image starts to fracture. Daniel noticed it too. His voice dropped. "Evelyn, please." But I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "This is the part where I stop protecting the version of you that needed me silent." A beat. Then I added quietly. That was when the first guest stood up. Then another. Then whispers turned into full conversations. Phones came out. Not for drama. For confirmation. For documentation. For truth spreading faster than control could contain it. Vanessa's expression changed. For the first time, uncertainty. Daniel stood frozen in the center of it all. Watching his life split into two versions. The one he told. And the one I just revealed. And neither of them belonged to him anymore. The hall didn't erupt immediately. It fractured. Like glass under pressure that takes a second before it finally gives way. At first it was whispers. Then questions. Then people turning to each other, comparing what they were hearing to what they thought they knew. And Daniel stood in the middle of it all like a man watching his reflection split into pieces he could no longer put back together. "Evelyn," he said again, but weaker now. Not commanding. Not controlling. Just uncertain. Vanessa moved closer to him immediately, her voice tight. "This is spiraling," she whispered. "Do something." But Daniel didn't move. Because there was nothing left to control. I could feel it now. The shift in the room. The moment perception stops belonging to one person. A woman near the front stood up slowly. "So, everything she said is true?" she asked. No one answered immediately. Because no one needed to. The documents were still on the table. The recording had already played. And Daniel's silence was louder than any denial he could offer. Another guest spoke. "You let her carry everything?" Daniel finally snapped slightly. "That's not how it was." But his voice broke halfway through. And that was worse than any confession. Because it showed something cracking inside him too. Not truth, but identity. Vanessa stepped forward sharply now, trying to regain control. "This is inappropriate," she said firmly. "This is a private family matter being turned into public spectacle." I looked at her calmly. "No," I said. "This became public the moment he erased me privately." That landed differently. Because people understood erasure more than arguments. A quiet murmur moved through the crowd again. Daniel looked at me now. Really looked. And for the first time since I arrived, there was no distance in his eyes. Only realization. Not of what I had done, but of what he had done. His voice came out lower. "I didn't mean to hurt you." That sentence. So late. So small. I nodded slowly. "I know." A pause. Then I added. "But you did anyway." Silence again. This one heavier than before. Because there was no rebuttal left. Vanessa looked around now, visibly unsettled. People were no longer looking at Daniel with admiration. They were looking at him with reassessment. And that was something money and reputation cannot fix instantly. A guest spoke quietly from the side. "This changes everything." Another responded. "Not everything, but it changes him." Daniel heard that. I saw it in his face. The way his jaw tightened. The way his breathing slowed like he was trying to hold himself together in real time. He stepped slightly forward toward me. His voice softer now. "Why now?" he asked. That question. Finally. Not defensive. Not accusatory. Just human. I held the folder in my hands again. Not raising it. Just holding it. And I answered honestly. Because I spent years convincing myself that love meant silence. A pause. And I finally stopped believing that. That quiet truth settled deeper than anything else I had said. No one interrupted. Not even Vanessa. Because this wasn't a fight anymore. It was an ending. Daniel looked down slightly. And when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I didn't see it," he said. I nodded. "I know." A pause. "But I did." That difference mattered. A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Final. From somewhere in the hall, someone whispered. "She should have been acknowledged all along." That sentence moved through the crowd differently. Because it wasn't accusation. It was recognition. And recognition changes narratives faster than anger ever can. Vanessa stepped back slightly now. Not dramatically. Just subtly. Because she realized something too. This wasn't something she could control anymore. Not with words. Not with image. Not with timing. Daniel looked around the room again. Then back at me. And for the first time, he didn't look like a man defending his life. He looked like someone realizing he might have built it wrong. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to fix this." I nodded slowly. "I know." A pause. Then I added gently. "Some things aren't meant to be fixed. Only understood." That was when everything shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But permanently. Because understanding is heavier than denial. And impossible to undo. I closed the folder fully now. Not as closure. But as completion. And I said one final thing before turning away. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding." A pause. "I came here to stop disappearing in it." And then I walked away. Not chased. Not stopped. Just witnessed. Behind me, the room remained standing. But nothing inside it was the same anymore. Not Daniel. Not Vanessa. Not the story they thought they owned. Because the truth had already left the room. And it didn't need permission to stay outside. I didn't stay for the rest of the wedding. Not because I was chased out. Not because I was asked to leave, but because something inside me had already finished what it came to do. The air outside felt different. Not lighter exactly. Just real. Like I had been holding my breath inside that hall for 23 years, and only now realized I was allowed to exhale. I stood for a moment near the entrance, watching people slowly leave in clusters. Whispers still followed them. Phones still buzzed. The story was already spreading beyond the room. Not as gossip anymore, but as something heavier. Something people would remember. And I realized something strange. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't collapsing. I wasn't breaking down the way I expected. Instead, I felt quiet. Deeply quiet. Like a storm had passed and left behind a version of me I hadn't met before. My phone vibrated. Daniel. Again. I looked at the screen. And for a moment, I almost answered. Almost. But I didn't. Because I knew what that call would be. Not resolution. Not healing. Just confusion trying to reassemble itself into control. I let it stop. Then I turned it off. For the first time in years. Not as escape, but as choice. Weeks later. The city didn't change. But my life did. Slowly. Quietly. Not in dramatic transformation, but in small irreversible shifts. I moved out of my old apartment. Not because I hated it, but because I finally stopped belonging to a version of myself that only existed to survive. I found work again. Different this time. Not multiple jobs just to exist. One job. One direction. One identity that didn't revolve around someone else's future. And in the silence that followed everything, I started hearing myself again. The things I liked. The things I wanted. The things I had buried so deeply I forgot they were mine. But healing didn't mean forgetting. Because sometimes memory stays. It just stops hurting the same way. Daniel. He reached out again eventually. Not immediately. Not confidently. But carefully. Messages at first. Then a call I didn't answer. Then another message. I didn't realize how much you carried until I saw it all at once. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry. Not emotional. Just aware. Because realization after damage is not the same as understanding before it. We met once. Not at the wedding venue. Not in a place of performance. Just a quiet cafe. Neutral ground. He looked different. Not physically. But in presence. Less certain. Less composed. More human. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said, I thought I was building something that made us both proud. I nodded slowly. I know. A pause. Then I said, but you forgot I was part of the foundation. He lowered his eyes. I didn't see it that way then, he admitted. I didn't respond immediately. Because I believed him. But belief doesn't erase consequence. I know, I said softly. Silence again. Then he said something quieter. I'm sorry. Not performative. Not defensive. Just simple. And for the first time, I accepted it without needing it to change the past. I know, I repeated. But this time it meant something different. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. Walking out of that cafe, I understood something I hadn't before. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. And justice isn't revenge. It's clarity. Clarity about what you were. What you gave. And what you will never reduce yourself to again. Daniel didn't lose everything. But he lost the illusion that his story stood alone. And I didn't win everything. But I regained something far more important. Myself. Time passed in a way I didn't notice at first. Not because life became perfect. But because it stopped being centered around a single wound. The silence Daniel left behind wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. And in that silence, I started rebuilding something I had never properly built before. A life that belonged to me. Not a role. Not a sacrifice. Not a background character in someone else's success story. Just me. Months later, I saw him again. Accidentally. Outside a courthouse. He looked calmer than before. Not fixed. Not redeemed. Just aware. We didn't rush into conversation. We stood there for a moment like two people learning a new language. Finally, he spoke. "I'm not trying to become that version of myself again," he said quietly. I nodded. "That's good," I replied. A pause. Then he added, "I still think about everything you did." I looked at him. "I hope you don't just think about it," I said softly. "I hope you understand it." That hit differently. Because thinking is memory. But understanding is responsibility. He nodded slowly. "I'm trying," he said. And for the first time, I believed that effort mattered more than apology. But I also knew something else. Trying doesn't rewrite the past. It only shapes what comes next. Walking away from everything didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. I stopped confusing loyalty with self-erasure. I stopped calling silence strength. I stopped measuring my worth through someone else's success. And slowly, I began to understand something powerful. Love that requires you to disappear is not love. It is dependency disguised as sacrifice. And sacrifice without recognition eventually becomes invisible suffering. I built a new routine. Simple things at first. Morning walks without urgency. Meals I didn't rush through. Work that didn't drain my identity. People who knew me, not as someone's sister or caretaker. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be needed to feel valuable. I already was. One final conversation came weeks later. Short. Honest. No tension this time. Just closure. "I wish things didn't happen the way they did," he said. I nodded. "So do I." A pause. Then I added softly, "But I'm glad I stopped letting them define me." He looked at me for a long moment. Then said something I didn't expect. "You deserved better." I didn't argue. Because it was true. But I also didn't need it anymore. Because deserving better and accepting better are not the same thing. And I had finally learned the difference. Some people will only recognize your value after you stop offering it for free. Some truths arrive too late to prevent pain. But just in time to prevent repetition. And some endings don't come with closure. They come with clarity. Final question, for viewers. If someone only realizes your worth after losing access to your sacrifice, was it ever love, or just convenience disguised as connection? If this story moved you, don't just scroll past it. Like, share, and subscribe if you want more emotional storytelling like this. Not because the story ends here, but because there are many more voices that deserve to be heard after silence. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear.